So welcome, and you're listening to Conversations on Sex, Addiction, and Relationships. I'm Wendy Conquest, and I'm here with Dan Drake, Tim Stein, and Jeannie Vitoni. And we're talking about the effects of COVID on our lives and on our relationships. So again, welcome. I'm not finding a lot of conversation around how people are dealing with the last 2 years. I'm not finding that people are talking about the effects that the whole thing has had on them and their family. We're not talking about losses. Someone might say, yes, I lost 2 family members, and then that's sort of it. It's like, okay, but that's kind of a big deal. So I wanted to talk about how the 3 of you have been experiencing the last 2 years.
And I think, I don't know about you guys, but moving from, because I think that's going to be huge. I felt like that in relationships or family members, depending on where they stood with things. But I've also noticed shifting from your neighbor being a threat to now all of a sudden they're not. I think that what does that do over a couple of years when, everyone you come in contact with could put you in danger, or you could put them in danger. I don't know. What toll does that take psychologically?
Not just that, but also with the political differences where it went from we don't always see eye to eye. Yeah, they're a little bit on the conservative side, or they're a little bit on the liberal side, but we sort of like get along until all the stuff happened, and it pushed so many people to the extremes. And now that it's coming out the other side, people are kind of hopefully sort of tamping down. And what is it like to reconnect with those people that were the other side of that massive political divide?
Or are people reconnecting?
Yeah, or are they? Are they just living with the divide and assuming that there is no middle? Which is equally sad.
I've noticed out here, where a lot of people have been, how cautious they were, they're like, I'm just sick of it. I don't care anymore. Almost this weird shift from I was really cautious, protective, and now whatever happens, I'm just over it. I'm fatigued. I kind of like this burnout of caution. They just don't care.
I think some of that fatigue is partly due to the effectiveness of the vaccines. Is that lots of people still know people who are getting sick, but although there are lots of people who do get very sick, there are many, many more who aren't. And so the risk factor, I think the fear level has come down. And the new norm is it's scary, but it's doable. You just don't know how, if you're going to be the one that's going to be very sick or not. But I think the fear piece, because the effects have decreased because of the efficiency, that's not the word, of the vaccine. Yeah, that one. Well, I think also I'm surrounded, the people I interact with, it's very often a topic of conversation of the impact, especially with the children, students.
That's another whole thing.
High school age, elementary school, college students, people coming into the workforce. So it's a topic we absolutely are talking about regularly. So for me, it doesn't feel like a far away topic that's not discussed.
But I still think there's long-term implications, like what these kids, some of the kids who've never gotten to read facial expressions beyond this, or they've never touched other kids, or that their norm for play is online or learning is online. Like, what the heck's that going to do for socialization, for affect regulation, and intimacy and connection with other human beings? I have no idea how that's going to play out.
I've been wondering about that. I was on a plane about 3 weeks ago, and there was a newborn baby, and not newborn. I think she might have been maybe a month or 2 old, but little. And I have my mask on the plane because, right, you have to have your mask on the plane. And I just wanted to pull my mask down and just smile at her, and I was trying to make my eyes smile while I was smiling behind the mask. And I was thinking, oh my gosh, the only people that she sees smile are her mom and dad, or maybe, you know, close family members, but the majority of humanity that she interacts with, she doesn't get that feedback.
Mhm.
And so, you know, what is this going to look like for her? Because we know with bonding, we want to see the whole face, and we want to see the smiles, and we want to see, you know, we want to see the smile.
Mhm. Mhm.
So for me, I have definitely experienced my own traumatic triggers around things with the virus. And one of the things is that, and I'll self-divulge here, one of the things is, I don't know if I did the right thing. I don't know. You know, I made choices along the way, and I don't know if I made the right choices. And so and so when I talk to, you know, my friends sort of from both positions of, um, I have one friend, she says, you know, I'm going to get the vaccine as often as I'm being told to. And if that's, you know, twice a year, then that's what I'm going to do. And then I have on the other side, people saying, I am not getting vaccinated. I don't trust it. I'm not doing it. So, so it's this piece of, with my choice, did I make the right decision? Did I not make the right decision? Am I on the right track here? I found that there are so many variables, and I'm going to also be asking you guys, you know, how, like, fear. Do you think certain decisions were based on pure fear, or was it, no, I'm taking in all the information, I'm making an educated decision? So like, what part of the brain did were people's decisions coming from? Was it the midbrain, or was it the prefrontal cortex? Like, where were we making decisions from?
You know, there's another topic that comes into this, which I think is fascinating, which is, I believe the term is the Kruger-Dunning effect, which is the less experience and knowledge you have about something, the more you tend to overestimate your ability to understand and perform. And so there's this piece when it comes to the pandemic of, when we don't have a lot of information, we're not epidemiologist experts, but we hear something from the news and we hang on to whatever it is, and we overestimate our ability to be accurate and know the facts and really what's going on, as opposed to the experts that are, you know, looking at science. And so they're much more nuanced. They're like, well, this is what might happen, and that what might happen. And then, you know, we have a lot of people that will say, well, they're idiots because they obviously didn't know. It's like, well, no, they were basing their decisions on other stuff. We were overestimating our ability to predict and understand what was really going to happen.
Mm-hmm. Wendy, on the different one, I really liked when you were saying the rejection, like the friend of, you know, only if, and I was thinking that's obviously in my world a safety seeking piece, you know, trying to make sure it was safe for her to interact in a way that she felt comfortable, but was also from a health perspective safe. And interesting that you experienced that on the other side of the relationship. You experienced it as a personal rejection.
Mm-hmm.
And you said that, I was just thinking about my experience with my family, friends, and then other clients and such, is that, isn't that interesting, the personalization that I too have felt when I examined that for a moment, that someone else's self-safety mechanisms were, for me, a rejection or a push away.
So just to remind you all, you're listening to Conversations on Sex, Addiction, and Relationships. And today we're talking about the effects of COVID on society and our psyche. So, so one of the pieces that we were talking about is what we can do to work with, what do we want to call it? We could call it, for those of you who have had COVID and are suffering from long-term COVID, what can you do? For those of you that are experiencing different things like grief, rejection, loss, what can you do? So that's what we're talking about now. So I'm just going to say that one of the things that I had to think about a lot was, so my parents were teenagers during World War II. And so I heard a lot from my mom about what they used to do. And one of the things that was big was going to the movies. And so while, and I know that so many people turn to Netflix, during these last 2 years. But the thing that I want to sort of punctuate is what are people watching on Netflix? What kinds of material are you allowing into your world now? And so I guess I would strongly support things that when you start watching it, does your body relax or does it become more stressful? And so, what does this mean for, action films or dramatic films or, my thought is maybe not right now, maybe take a break from that right now. Unless you're feeling a lot of anger. And so what I found is when people are really, really angry, watching material that has angry content can actually be helpful. It's sort of like a reflection of, oh, that's how I'm feeling, without actually saying it.
Mhm.
What do you guys think?
I think one of the things I recommend to others and myself, and I believe you see this reflected in the parks, is being outside and being with nature and being outside the walls, looking at the sky, looking at the leaves, trees, and other people. Our attendance in our parks has really risen, which is excellent because being outside, connecting with others in a safe way, people tend to feel safer. Whether they're wearing masks or not, when they're walking, they feel safer outside. So really utilizing your recreational agencies in your community.
Mhm.
Have you guys been spending more time outside? I certainly have been hiking the hills a lot.
I early on, probably before it was okay to do it, I realized I needed for my mental health, not just my physical health.
Mhm.
I realized just early on in the pandemic, I was like trying to, be inside, do sessions inside from home. I realized I need to get to the office. Even if I'm doing remote sessions, I needed to get outside. I like walking. I live close enough I can actually walk to the office. It's the least efficient way to get here, and I try to do it as many days as possible. So I do that. I go running outside a few days a week. So I have definitely in a park. I need it.
Mhm. Mhm. Mhm.
I've just really noticed the importance for myself of making sure that my activity level stayed up. I mean, when everything started shutting down, my wife and I started looking at, there was a person that my wife did an aerobics class with, and suddenly she was doing stuff online. So it was like, okay, we're doing that exercise. We've started doing yoga. As it's opened up a little bit more, I've gotten back out to playing tennis and playing soccer. My son and I are going mountain biking. And um, when my activity level drops away, I don't function as well. And I know that there's a natural antidepressant, anti-anxiety related to increased activity level. And I know for myself that is just super important.
Mhm. Mhm. Mhm.
I also just want to bring up the idea of, so I hear this a lot, of a sense of freedom. So if we don't need to wear masks anymore, if we can meet with people again, we can go to different venues that perhaps we couldn't before. That I get curious about that part of the brain that says, oh my gosh, I've been repressed, I've been trapped, and now I'm free. And so I guess I would say a word of caution to just be very mindful about, especially imbibing in extra alcohol, extra recreational drugs, anything like that, to just be much more aware of what you're doing and why you're doing it. And the other piece too is, don't be surprised if this has manifested in different areas. So I have known people who have had a very, very difficult time going back to work or going back to full-time work. There's a feeling they can't understand it. It's like, there's just this malaise, this sort of why bother feeling. And I associate that with the grieving process and loss. And so I've been encouraging people to just list your losses, whatever they may be, how minimal it might be. Just be conscious of everything that has been taken away over these last 2 years?
Mhm.
And then how do you communicate that to other people and get support around it?
Mhm.
I think it's a really good point. I've even noticed on a subtle level with myself that I'll watch I'll watch a movie or something I used to, prior to the pandemic, or I'll look back at pictures, or I'll think back to events or something, and I'll be like, oh yeah, that's when we sat in a room full of people and didn't think about getting sick from the person next to it. Like this weird thing that you didn't think about a couple of years ago as much, unless you had some sort of, terrible condition or something. But
Mhm.
now I start shaking people's hands and I'm, how do they feel about it? What is it? It's just this weird extra steps that I'm finding. It's awkward. It's like a re-entry that feels different. And even in California, where we have right now, at the time we're recording this, we have, we're lowering restrictions, but not in my city. So
Mhm.
it's just a weird juxtaposition. There's some freedom, but then there's not. So some people are just saying, well, screw it, I'm just going to do whatever. And I don't know. I'm finding it's kind of confusing and it's awkward a bit so just giving, I would just say giving, for all of us, giving ourselves permission to
Imperfect.
be imperfect, re-enter in a way it's okay if it's a little bit, we're all trying to figure it out again. And that's the other thing too. I would say that sometimes my tendencies we want to go back to prior or something, or,
Mm.
we're going back. The problem is we're never going back to what we had. It's because we've already had these last couple of years. So I think being mindful, that's part of grief, is we're in a different place, even if there's some, freedoms around. I think just being mindful that we're all different a couple years later and giving ourselves some grace for that.
Mhm.
I know that, like you were saying at the time we're recording this, the mask mandates in California just lifted. And so I went to the grocery store the other day and I had my mask in my pocket, but I walked through the door, and as I looked around, everybody had a mask on. And so for me, there was this interesting decision of, well, I don't need to wear a mask, but do I want to wear a mask? And I put it back, I put it on because it felt like it doesn't bother me to have the mask on. It's not the end of the world. And I think the other people would be more comfortable if I did that. And there are other times that I've chosen not to wear that mask at other times. And I don't know what the right choice is or what the wrong choice is. I like to think that I'm giving myself permission to be imperfect, like you said. I'm sure there are people out there that would say I'm being paranoid or I'm being a sheeple. But I don't think that there's a right way through this, and just giving ourselves permission to sort of imperfectly stumble through the reopening, assuming it continues.
Right. Well, can we just pause for a second with that? That's a critical, assuming it continues. We've been experiencing that for a couple of years, right? Like, okay, where there's some, there's an opening, there's some new free, wait, nope. All through the last couple of years.
That's the painful piece, is that, we keep wanting to be over the hump and then it keeps coming back. I just need to make this plug, much like partners who think that they're all the way through and the addict is doing better, and then they get blindsided by it again.
Very true. Very true.
Right.
I wanted
I've
to talk
noticed
about.
a 2-month cycle. So it rises for 2 months, then it goes away for 2 months. And someone said, oh, it's around the holidays. And I'm like, no, it's not. It just, so now we're in the low of 2 months. So, okay. So in 2 months, we'll see where we're at.
Let's
I wanted to bring up.
real quick. What gifts? I mean, this has not been a fun 2 years for anybody, but what gifts have you experienced from this? Is there anything that you walk out of this with saying that actually was a gift and it was helpful for me? I know
Yeah.
I have some.
Yeah, for me, it's about relationships.
Mhm.
And so, and I haven't followed through with this yet, but I want to, is making more time for my relatives, making more time for close friends, to stay in touch. And I had a very good friend that died at the early stages of COVID, kind of a fluke thing, but she's gone. And that's it, she's gone. So didn't expect that, didn't expect that to happen. And I think it's also made me think about my own mortality a lot more. I thought, oh, I'm not afraid to die. Yes, I am. Oh, yes, I am. So that was a wake-up call of, wow, this is something that I think I need to look at a little closer.
Yeah.
This showed me, kind of like what you said with relationships, it really showed me what was most important. I think when you strip away the day in, day out, and we have to question, how do we work? How do we live? How do we, function as a society or a family or friendships? I think it showed me what was the most important, and kind of the simplicity. I think getting back to simple routines was and like that was little rituals was something helpful for me. One thing that my wife and I do now, is every Friday we do popcorn Friday. Simple, I know, and I look forward to it. It's this little thing. We just don't have to do anything special around it, but I know that I'm going to get some popcorn when I go home today, because today's Friday as we're recording. But I don't know. I love it. That's that a little ritual that I can appreciate, part of family time. Those little things I think I appreciate way more than I would have in the past.
Right.
That's been my experience. It's sort of like clarity of my priorities. What are the activities that I really value, and carving time out to make sure that those things happen. I realized how much I enjoy having music in my life. And, when we record these in my office, you can see behind me that there's a guitar that sits behind me, because I moved those to my office so that when I have some free time, I can take care of myself, understanding how much I truly value the relationships and the connections, with family and with friends, and who those people are that really feed my soul. I've got a greater clarity of all of that, because so much of this was taken away, and it just forced me to sit in this little space of, somewhat isolation for a while. Brought some clarity.
For me, I think it was also the simplification, because all these distractions are not available. These fun opportunities aren't available. It did condense my world. And so I spent more time with my special people, friends and family, but also the simplification. I don't really need all the whatevers. And so I think about also the younger generation is very much in simplification. And then I think about, how has this further impacted their view? You've got the teenagers who are much more interested in buying thrift and not buying new objects and gadgets, except for phones. But their world is their environments where they live. I'm thinking college age and high school, like where they live, their environment is simplistic. And so I think it's very interesting that they naturally were going to that in a way of life. And then COVID, I think probably stronger impact to solidify that now belief. And I'll be very curious as they grow into older adults, how does that change or not change? Do they become the generation of secondhand and let's not do new, and we don't need big vacations, let's just get a backpack and go? How that carries from that developmental place, that generational, and then the impact of COVID. So I'm really just kind of watching how it goes. But for me, it was simplification as well. Now, whether I'll stay there or not, I don't know, right? I was just complaining to you all that I need to go on a trip, and yet I just went on one, and here I am wanting to run for the hills already. Let's go away for a couple of days. So I'm curious how I'm going to transition when those distractions, those opportunities come back into my world. Will I go for it? Will I not? Will I find a middle ground? I feel like there's a lot of curiosity and experimentation for me, but also I'm guessing for a lot of people.
Those were kind of wrapping up the episode. What is one piece of advice you would give to people as sort of like we're going through this transition? What's one thing that you would say, this is what I would recommend that you do to take care of yourself moving through this transition?
So the self-care focus. Is that what you're talking about? Mental health, self-care focus?
Might be self-care. It might be relational. It might be, we do a lot of talk about recovery and healing, it might be something along those lines. But what's one thing that you would just sort of put out there for people to do as we're moving through this transition?
Mhm. I would say stay in contact with the people you feel safest, emotionally safest, physically safest with.
Mhm.
Because I think that maintains that social interaction, feels safe, feels fulfilling. And if you don't have those people in your life, finding those people in your life. I think it's also probably why a lot of therapists I know are all full. Because there's a lot of people reaching out for help, which is excellent. That'd be my go-to.
I would say have conversations with, have conversations with everyone. And I would say if you're up for it, if you're more extroverted, whoever you come in contact with, ask them how they're doing. Because there's a lot of people in a lot of pain right now. So it means a lot to just authentically say, you know, hey, how's your day going? How are you doing? And with the people that you have to have more in-depth conversations about, like where, you know, wow, what happened over these last 2 years? Were we in contact? Were we not in contact? Were the things that I said and did that were upsetting? Can I tell you maybe what you did or said that was upsetting, and to try to have some resolution around it?
Yeah.
For me, I'd say a couple things. The first would be, with new openings, bring possibly new freedoms, which also bring new potential distractions. So there may be more feelings or stuff that's going to surface along the way. So just don't get too distracted by the new shiny things that might be out there that you can do or return to or whatever. I think give yourself that space to kind of sit with what we've all been going through for 2 years. Maybe haven't actually been able to fully process since we've been in survival mode for a long time. And in the same token, at the same time, be gentle with yourself. We're all figuring this out. No, we've never been through this before. So be gentle with yourself.
I think for me, I was going to go with the self-care thing, but as I've been listening to you, I think the thing that I would just say more than anything is seek to understand. You know, we're at a point where our society's become so polarized, so much us versus them. And the perception that gets put out there is that there is no middle ground. And my experience is that that's not true. And also, if we're all trying to convince the other people they're wrong, logical arguments don't change people's minds. Relationship and emotional experiences and conversations will shift people's perspectives. And so rather than, you know, from one perspective canceling, or from another perspective, you know, saying that that's absolutely wrong, seeking to understand where other people are coming from, seeking to understand sort of, if you disagree with someone, not that just they're wrong, but what do they believe and why do they believe it? And try to understand what's going on. I think life individually and as a community is much fuller and richer when we use that to step forward with, as opposed to highlight the differences.
So thank you all for joining us today, as we had a sort of different conversation today about COVID and the conversation of sex addiction and relationships. We hope that you enjoyed our program today and listen for more future episodes.
And keep rating us on Spotify, iTunes, YouTube.
All those places.